Welcome to Maverick Minded Realtors. We are here to talk to you about the biggest mistakes that realtors make writing on the TREC Texas contract. Happens all the time. And when I first was doing my contracts as a realtor and learning, these were some things I wish I knew. And it's just going to make you look more professional. So we're here to give you a list of what those look like.
This is a short list. There's a longer list.
So these are the most common.
These are common.
These are the most common. So we're just going to go one by one. And we'd love your comments below. If you have any insight, please do so. So let's jump right in. One of my biggest pet peeves is
the seller name.
the seller name.
Like, it's pretty easy to look up. Come on, people. Like, we go in there, you're looking at it. It usually doesn't have it on the MLS because agents don't put it on the MLS for whatever reason. But then you can go to the tax rolls and you look it up. Look up who it is you're buying the home from.
Yeah. Go to
just put it in there.
Just whatever county you're in, put in County Appraisal District Property Search, and you're going to see that name. It's also important because they might have a middle name in there, or they might be in a trust, or they might have something else. So you can absolutely call the agent, or you could just do your due diligence if you're signing a quick offer or a blind offer, which happens a lot in this market. So look it up on the CAD.
Yeah.
And you can find it.
It's even easier if you just do realist text the tax and you're already in the MLS.
I'm making it more complicated. Listen,
you know, I mean, come on.
But a lot of different avenues that you can do it aside from just calling and correcting. And a lot of times what I notice too is if a property is in an entity name, sometimes the CAD shortens it. And so it might not be the proper name. Which brings me to point number 2.
Yeah.
Which is if a seller or a buyer is an entity, that means it's an LLC, it's not in a personal name. What you're going to do is you're going to put the name of that entity as the buyer or the seller. And then as the signer, that is the name. It's the entity. But who is signing? You are not putting into DocuSign or Dotloop the name of the entity. You're putting the authorized signer's name. So if I own my company and I am signing on a property I'm buying or selling, they're going to put Casey Smith as the signor, and then my LLC is going to be below. This is one of the biggest
signing
mistakes.
for the LLC.
Right.
But you definitely need to make sure that even if you're if you're representing an investor, because a lot of investors make this mistake as well. They're like, no, I sign it as the LLC. No, we need an individual to be responsible for this property.
Which means the title company is going to ask you for your operating agreements to verify that that person is authorized to sign on the behalf of the LLC. Now, I do have some clients that are entity owners that like to sign their name and then comma manager or managing member of LLC.
Yeah.
That is a personal legal preference. Consult your
attorneys,
but you can just do a name or you can do an actual formal name of it, and then you would just initial accordingly.
Yeah. Something to remember.
Number 3. Section 6.
This one she's gone off on. So this
is the TREC 1 to 4 single residential contract that we are focusing on. Now, there are additional documents, which we will absolutely go into depth on. But on this one, on Section 6, on title policy and survey, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is Section A, 8, 1, or 2. You have the option to put that your title policy that is going to be received, and that is a title policy, just for sake of clarification, is the insurance you have on the purchase to make sure it's free and clear, everything is owned and good.
Yeah, all that.
There's an option to say that that the policy will be amended or deleted from the title policy, or will be amended to read shortages in the area at the expense of, and you have to confirm if it's the seller or the buyer. Now, if you have a survey as a seller or you're getting a survey, regardless, if a survey is involved, I talked to some title companies and they verified that you should probably get it, because to get that additional policy coverage is very minimal considering to what it covers. And what it basically means is that if you are purchasing a property and there's an existing survey or you're getting a new one, it means that if there are any future issues with the boundaries or anything that could come up, that it will actually, the title policy, you'll pay for additional coverage to cover that. So if you select box 1, it will not. If you select box 2, it will read in your title policy that it coverages shortages in the area. Now, the expense for this extra additional coverage could be at the expense of the seller or the buyer. It's negotiable. But I highly recommend that you guys understand what it means. And usually in Texas, if it's a homestead, it's only going to cost you 5% of the premium. And if it's an LLC, it's going to cost you 15% of the premium. So do the math on that. But basically, if you're getting a survey and you're buying a property, highly recommended to get that additional coverage. So mark the box number 2 that the title policy will be amended to read shortages in the area at the expense of, and put it on the seller if you want to. Negotiate it. It's
Negotiate
completely
it out.
open.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand what that clause means. So clarification there.
And whenever we're talking about shortages, we're talking about like somebody is 5 feet in on your property
Right.
with a fence. Well, you didn't know that until you did the survey or until you got the survey. Most people have been living in their houses for years and years, and they have no idea where their property line is and whether they're infringing on somebody else's.
And it could be anything. So it's just a
Yeah.
minimal cost to make sure that you have coverage in the future. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people want to save up front, but this is just a good thing and negotiable. So why not? Number 4,
Number 4.
also on the survey.
Yep.
So that was about the title policy and the survey. The section 4 is basically outlining, you have 3 options in this section. The first one is the biggest mistake people make. If you are a buyer's agent writing a contract on a property and you are unsure if there's a survey, you're going to select that box. If you're unsure, that's the box you check. Because in the bold writing, if you read it, it's very, very clear where it says that if the existing survey is not approved for any reason, maybe the legal's wrong, maybe some boundary changes happen, for whatever
Maybe they did
reason.
an addition.
Maybe they did an addition.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, for context, all surveys that exist and any new surveys that are to be gotten have to be approved by the lender and the title company both. They have to make sure everything is correct, the legal descriptions, the boundary lines, all the information is there for them to approve it. That means that if you have a survey that's not approved, that forces you to get a new one, you select number 1. And then you can also negotiate whether that's the cost of the seller or the buyer. If you know that a seller does not have a survey, do not check box number 1. Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's what boxes number 2 and 3 are for. That is where they say that either the buyer or the seller is going to pay for it. So a lot of agents get this wrong. They select box number 1 as default, and then they basically think that, well, they don't have a survey, but it's the buyer expense. That's not what the bold writing says. So read it very, very carefully. It's pretty clear. That that's only if there's an existing survey. So if the MLS listing does not include a survey and says there is no survey, you will never check box number 1, ever.
And little side note, if you're the seller and or the selling agent, and you have a survey, get a T47, which is an additional document that needs to be notarized that says, yes, we have a survey, and the seller has to take it to a bank or get it notarized, basically stating that nothing has changed since the survey was done. Because in order to submit a previous survey, you have to have that submitted as well.
Yes.
So,
and this is a loophole for people to get out of contracts, because there is a time limit to receive the T47 after you contract. So best practice is to have it already signed and notarized by your seller and put in your listing docs to be included, so that you don't have that risk of falling out of contract because your seller doesn't have time to get it notarized, or whatever the reason being.
Something happened, my dog died, whatever.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
T47. And also, just a side note, I have, this is something I do a lot, is if for some reason my seller as a listing agent is having family emergencies or issues or is unable to do so, sometimes I will proactively ask the buyer's agent, is this okay to sign at closing? And it has to be an agreement, it has to be in writing, and everyone has to agree to it, and they can slip it into the closing dockets. Not uncommon to do, but if you are in a bind, that is an option. Just make sure you get it in writing.
Not all brokers will allow that.
Not all of them will allow it, so make sure. Okay, number 5 in the objections section.
Love objections. This one's awesome.
There's an objections section where you can put that in the event that you want to purchase this property for a specific reason. Let's say you want to hold it as a rental, or let's say you want to run a business out of it. Whatever the reason is that might be outside of single family residential, which is its intended use, you would put that objection there. Meaning, if we start this process of pulling title and closing on the property, and you find out that HOA prohibits you running a hair salon out of this property, or prohibits rentals or short-term rentals, that's where you would put objections. If you are moving into this house specifically to live in it, you do not need to put residential use.
I don't know. I feel like almost 90% of the contracts I get say residential use only. And I'm like, that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's
that's a default.
House.
You don't need to put that in there. You guys can
That is not the
that.
objection. Like, there are no houses out there where you're not supposed to live in them.
Yes. So stop it.
Stop it.
Stop it.
I don't know who started that trend.
I don't know.
But it is obnoxious.
I would say 70% of the contracts I get say it.
Yeah, it's
kind of funny.
ridiculous. Anyway.
Okay, number 6, section 7B, number 1 and 2, property condition. You have 2 options. You can select that you accept the property as is, or you can select that we accept it with the condition that maybe you said that you would put up a fence. Maybe there's a pre-negotiation that happened prior to you contracting that you can put in there.
I walk up on the property and there's a dead tree in the front yard.
Right.
I don't need an inspection to tell me that's a dead tree. I want that dead tree removed. I know it's going to cost me $600, so I'm going to put that right there.
So that would be the place, not in special provisions anywhere else. It's in the property condition section 7B. A lot of people are nervous to check the property I accept as is because they think that they can't negotiate repairs. That's not true. You're accepting the property in its current condition as you've seen it, pending your option period and inspections.
Yeah.
So know that, pay attention to that, even as a selling agent, if they are putting any objections in there, because it can get really easily missed. I had put one in the other day on the condition that we replaced some sliding doors, and I was like, or put them in, and I was like, wait, what? I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah.
But they can slip in conditions in there. And I have had some of my sellers, even though I told them this, forget about it. And so when they got the list of repairs, it wasn't on there, but it was on the original contract and they missed it.
Yeah.
So as an agent, make sure that you're paying attention to that clause, filling it in correctly, and putting it on your list of things, repairs to do eventually.
Exactly.
Number 7.
Number 7.
Not disclosing that you're licensed if you're a buyer. So if you are a licensed realtor in the state of Texas, you must disclose this if you're buying it. So if I am a realtor and I'm buying a property, I do this often for my rental properties, I have to put in under Section 8A that I am a licensed realtor in the state of Texas.
If you are a part of an LLC that is purchasing a property,
Correct.
you own more than 10% of that LLC, you have to put in there that you are a part of the LLC and you are a licensed realtor.
Right. And it doesn't need to be fancy language. Just say that you're there, disclose you're licensed, and that you
have to do that.
Interest in it. A lot of people forget to do that, and I have to send it back to get that initialed quite often.
Now, one I added that's in here, so we'll get a nice round number instead of 9. We're doing 10. Is the seller's disclosure notice.
Oh, yeah.
Is basically the seller's disclosure notice. This is more for the selling agent than the buyer's agent. Is you want to make sure that seller's disclosure notice is sent to that buyer agent and they have it completed, signed along with that offer. Because the moment that you delay that, let's say you give it to them, you've signed the contract, you give it to them 3 days later. Well, then they just got an extension on their option period because they have 7 days.
Yes.
You just gave them 7 days from the moment that you gave them that seller's disclosure to just back out for any reason and get their earnest money. So maybe they only have a 5-day option and now they're 3 days into it. You just gave them additional days to their option period.
That's such a great point, and something that I check for a lot of my clients. We always check if that is checked off. And here's the thing, a lot of times you put it on your listing and they don't grab it. Don't take that for granted thinking, oh, I can just send it to them, because you might forget, you might get delayed in doing it, and you're right, it adds extra days, and it basically
gives them another out.
Gives them an out above
free
option.
And clear out.
Yeah. So we should do an episode on how to write contracts on what side.
We should.
I feel it's in the making. Okay, special provisions. I feel like this is one of the most misunderstood sections of the contract. I feel like we are taught as realtors that it is DEFCON 5 if we write anything in there.
Yep.
And so I think it's a highly misused and highly underutilized a lot of times, because the rules are that you cannot put anything in special provisions as already outlined in the contract. So I have had investors come to me and write things in special provisions. I'm like, you need to take this out because it's already clarified in a previous section. And they just want to write it home and make sure it's clear. Nope. That's your communication skills. You cannot legally do that. So we need to make sure that the special provision is used for something that is not already outlined,
and that is not changing the contract as it's written.
Correct.
So you can't put any request or anything that would change. It's only statement of fact in that paragraph.
So a common example of what people would do is, for example, if you require a property to be broom swept clean or something to be cleaned out prior to closing, that would be a pretty common one that I think people use. Again, it's just additional terms that you're agreeing upon that are not outlined in the original contract. So that can come, I mean, don't be scared to do it. It is something that if you want to have money dispersed a certain way, I think you can put it in there too. Although a lot of times it outlines it in their addendum. So
Yeah.
maybe not necessary, but that is a common way to use it.
Before we had the appraisal waiver and all of that, there was a lot of that going on. I think that's why
Mhm.
it got driven home a lot is during the uptick of 2020 and everything, going for
Yeah.
over appraised value. A lot of people were doing appraisal waiver in that paragraph, which altered the entire contract. So that's something you got to be aware of.
And you don't need to because there's addendums for that.
Now there's an addendum, so you can't put it in there.
So make sure you know what addendums are available to you. And for clarification, TREC contracts are state promulgated contracts that anyone can use. The Texas Association of Realtors contracts are ones you cannot. So look at the TREC, look at what's there, look at what you can use, and then basically you'll know what you can alter, what you're altering and what you're not.
Yep.
And I think the last one I had on my list is the use of and or assigns. So for your realtors out there that don't know that wholesaling and assigning contracts is legal, this is
It is.
it is episode coming up.
Yeah.
But it's a common thing where buyers or investors will contract a property and put and or assigns after the buyer name. So it would say Casey Smith and or assigns. And now all contracts are legally assignable in Texas, but a lot of title companies prefer that language because it lets them know that it's assignable. So it's a common thing for people to do. And then a lot of people don't do it.
Yep.
So I have talked to a lot of different title companies. They say it, we prefer it, but it doesn't make it not assignable if you don't do it. But it's just something to know as a realtor that if you see and or assigns, it typically means that the buyer is going to be not your end buyer. They're
It's a
probably
wholesaler.
going to wholesale it for a higher fee to someone else. And that's kind of a red flag. Maybe not a red flag, but it is a flag to know who you're dealing with and what type of transaction that you're dealing with. So just be aware that and or assigns, if you ever see it on the buyer line after a name, that's typically what that means and what that's going to be used for.
And I think just because a lot of realtors don't end up working with wholesalers
Mhm.
very much, and when they do, they have a lot of misconceptions of what that process looks like. So that's a really good indicator.
Yeah.
If you see that, then and then maybe if you're not familiar with how to work with a wholesaler, then you contact your broker or somebody in the office that is.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, those are my biggest lessons I've learned over the years. Did you
Yeah.
have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we hit the high notes. So that's your top 10.
Oh, you made it 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
top 10 of the things that you want to avoid or try to pay attention to when you are filling out those contracts.
Yeah. And so anyway, this podcast is here to help you guys learn things that we wanted to learn when we were first getting started.
Yeah.
A lot of nuanced stuff that happens in your day-to-day that you really learn from experience. So tune into future episodes. If you have suggestions or things you want to learn, comment below. We're going to be paying attention to them. Like, follow Maverick Minded Realtors. We're here to help you guys succeed in a changing market and a competitive market.
Thanks for joining us and see you next time.